Welcome to What the Health? The podcast where anything health is fair game. There's a lot of garbage advice and misinformation out there that can leave you feeling stumped and stuck. Together, let's sift through the sea of BS and find the best ways to get healthy and stay healthy. Join the team as we tackle the trends and bust the myths about health and wellness. Here are your hosts, Dr. Dan Turo, Angela Turo, and Dr. Riley Brown.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Today, what are we talking about?
Mobility. It's almost March. Mobility March.
Excellent. Well, the first question I absolutely had, because most people, let's just eliminate the misconception right away. Mobility, most people think, I got to be more flexible, right? Stretching.
No.
Correct.
Yes.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
Two completely different things. So
now is flexibility a part of mobility?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So flexibility is one component of mobility. So flexibility, like you brought up, stretching, that is what people often think of. So I say the classic stretch, can you sit on the ground with your legs straight and touch your toes?
Probably not.
I was going to say, a lot of people...
Not without significant warm-up.
A lot of people cannot. But that would be an example of flexibility. How flexible, how
far can you stretch your muscles,
exactly.
elongate the muscles.
Yes, exactly. Now, again, some people can touch their toes, but they might be, as you mentioned, moaning, groaning, or need a lot of warm-up, or it might hurt. They might kind of be forcing it towards the further point of that stretch. Yep. So that is one component, flexibility. How much can your muscle lengthen? Whereas mobility is really how much can you control that range of motion through a joint. So to be able to touch your toes, you need flexibility in your hamstring, which is the big muscle that goes to the back of your legs, and your calves, which goes down in the lower part of your legs. But you also need mobility in your hips, your low back, and even your knees to an extent, because kind of a lot of people, if you watch people, especially men, that just kind of tend to have tight hamstrings, you see them, as soon as they sit on the ground, their knees come off the ground. They can't sit flat and get their legs completely flat on the ground. So all of those come into play with mobility. And what you'll notice is if somebody has really good hip mobility, so they're able to work through that full range of motion of the hip, they'll not only be able to touch their toes, but they'll be able to control the motion the whole way out and the whole way back. So it won't be, oh God, and all that moaning, groaning.
So there's a strength component.
Exactly.
To this.
Yes. A strength and control. I always think mobility is control. So flexibility is looseness, is, being able to lengthen, but mobility is control. So actually the slower you can do things and control through that full range of motion shows more significant mobility than just being quote unquote loose, which is what we think of when we think of flexibility.
So if we talk about shoulder mobility and going, just being able to can you raise your arm up over your head, do it both sides, and
can you take it behind your back?
And again, a lot of times when we're looking at this, we're looking at symmetry, right? Because the more symmetrical you've got good left-right brain, balance in terms of, the motor neurons are sending messages out to the muscles, which the muscles then move the joints. And if you have symmetry of that movement, that's a very good sign of neurological balancing. But then, certainly there are things that can impact mobility. So could you take us through what are some things that could impact your mobility if it weakens or becomes asymmetrical as you age?
Yeah. So, when we're looking at mobility, we talked about flexibility. So being able to be loose enough to make that, but then there's also a weakness component. So usually when you have restricted mobility, it's either something's too tight or something's too weak to be able to control through that range of motion. So again, when you're talking about shoulder mobility, you might not be able to lift your arm up because you're having a lot of tightness in your neck, down through your back, even in that shoulder itself, or it could be actual weakness. Yes,
so you can't hold the weight of your arm.
Exactly, and that's where you'll see a lot, especially as people age, that muscle weakness comes into play, and all of a sudden you can't even support your own body, let alone your own body weight, your own limb weight. So again, think about taking a step. You need to be able to
Your
lift
whole body weight.
your body and the weight of your legs. So if you take whatever one of your legs weigh, you need to be able to lift that that entire weight up to be able to take a proper step. And again, as we age and get weaker, that's where you start to see a lot of people dragging their feet because they have weakness in their legs. You see them, kind of the posture the bad posture sets in because they don't have the strength to keep themselves in good posture. They, become risk of injury because they can't get that full range of motion. Think of trying to get the whatever you keep on the top shelf,
you get the plates or the cups up
and all
there.
of a sudden they can't do that, so then they start trying to strain or reach or
God forbid then they try to
get
up on a stool and then they're already
So all of these things, it all comes into play. So the muscle needs to be strong enough to control that. Again, I always think, can you just hold your arms out and hold them there? And a lot of people might be, oh, that's easy. Well, do that for 5 minutes and let me know how those arms feel.
And that's what I remember, like when I took my first official mobility class with you and a friend down in one of the gyms. She's laughing because she remembers my face and my moaning and groaning. But again, a lot of times it's again controlling the joint under tension through a range of motion, and then doing that repetitively back and forth. So I just remember some of the hips and your joints literally start burning because they're just not used to being activated in that way. And again, it's like, we probably don't recommend everyone do a class like that.
But there are lots of variations.
Yes, there are ways that you can build up to that. And again, I think that the adage of, use it or lose it really comes into play whenever you're talking about strength, you're talking about, mobility, flexibility. And if you're not engaging these joints, and your body, your neuromusculoskeletal system, if you're not engaging that constantly in a healthy way, you will start to see changes. Now, again, those changes aren't going to be evident over a couple of weeks, even over a year or two. But you go a decade down the road, and then what do we hear? Oh, I'm just getting older. It's like, well, you're not just getting older. You haven't done anything. You've been sitting at a desk for, the last 15 years, like this, and, you don't raise your arms at all. Like every day, again, you and I have the blessing of having a job where we are very active with what we do. But like every day, it's like I take my arms up overhead and, just work that range of motion. And obviously what I do with the adjustments moves those shoulders. But a lot of you out there don't have jobs or careers or a daily activity routine that puts your body through a full range of motion
on a regular basis
enough
so then when you do, like I always think of the classic example, you're reaching into the back seat and now all of a sudden you never work this range of motion and you reach into the back seat and that's when something pull strains.
And how many times do we hear that? It's like, oh, I just bent over to tie my shoe this morning and my low back went out, or I sneezed or I coughed and something went out. And we so much attribute that to, oh, I'm just getting older, rather than, no, you're getting weaker. And,
which really, it doesn't even, age it is a factor, but we're seeing this in younger and younger people where, they're having these issues because again, sedentary lives, not working out properly or not working out in a full dynamic way.
Well, and so then we get into the whole idea of like one-sided sports, right? We say it all the time, golfing, tennis, baseball, softball, bowling, like racket sports, it's all one-sided. And a lot of smart athletes and their trainers they've started to recognize that, because over the last decade, there's a lot more research showing that you will be better performing when you engage the other side. So you've got a lot of, professional athletes that are doing these one-sided sports. They'll do exercises to engage the opposite motion, because when you engage that symmetrically, you have much less of a risk of injury long-term. So
absolutely.
Going back to, again, like, that whole mobility class that I did and like my first introduction to mobility, it's like, it's not just that idea of strength, of lengthening, but like strength and can you go through a full range of motion? And so take that, you were touching on it a little bit, but like, getting into like just getting up and down from a seated position, squatting. How many people can't even get down into a squat position because their knees don't have full range, their hips or their ankles. Yeah. Oh, you had to bring up the ankles.
I had to bring up the ankles. Yeah.
That's one of my weaknesses.
And again, people don't think about that. It's like we think, okay, a squat, that's building strength in my legs and my glutes. And it absolutely is. Yeah. But if you don't have, like you said, the mobility throughout your hips. So if your hips are tight, which we see a ton of, because again, what do? We sit all day.
I would argue the majority of low back issues come from poor mobility in your hips.
So if those hips are tight, if you can't fully support, if you don't have the mobility of your hip to go through that full range of motion, you're going to start to bend forward as you go into that squat. And then what are you doing? Well, now you're putting more strain on that low back.
Yeah.
If your knees are tight, you'll start to see, that's where you start to see people with, you probably, if you've ever been taken a class or taught a squat, you probably heard the don't let your knees come
out over front of your toes.
That's not actually a bad thing if you have the right mobility in your ankles and knees to be able to do that. If you do a full primal squat, your knees are going to go over your toes because you're going all the way down to the ground. So if you're doing a squat for mobility, like I have a lot of people next door use the hold on to the TRX and then trying to actually get their butt all the way down to the ground. Now, again, you have to have the right mobility in your hips, your knees, and your ankles to be able to do that. But because you're using those hand supports, it's helping take some of that. You're using your full body.
You're assisting with the weakness and the strength so that you can actually get through the range of motion, which is the flexibility side of it. So, and being able to start somewhere and build up from that is very, very important.
Yes. So if you can get through that range of motion, then that's going to just help when you go to do a regular body weight squat or heaven forbid, start to add weight to it. Yeah. And because again, if you don't have that range of motion, you're not going to get the most out of your workout. You're not going to get the most out of that motion. And you're really not going to be building strength the way that you think you are, because you're going to be overcompensating. So we talked about left, right, if one side's tight. So for me, a really bad right hip, and I have to be very aware of that when I actually do a lot, when I do leg workouts, I do a lot of single sided. Yeah. So I'll do lunges or split squats as opposed to doing regular squats because I know I overcompensate and use my left more. My left is always more sore after a leg day than my right. And I know it's because I'm using it. Yeah. I'm overcompensating in that squat motion. It's just something I have to be aware of and I'm constantly working on. But that's the thing. If you're not aware of that and you're just going, doing your squats, you could be completely relying on one side more than the other and not being aware of that. Yeah. And I mean, that's something I assess with people, and I'll just, just watching them do a couple squats, or even not a full squat, I'll just put have them watch them sit down in a chair. Yep. And it's so obvious. You can see they either put the stronger side a little bit closer so that it's more support, or you'll see it'll be out a little bit more, or the weak side, the knee will kind of buckle in. There's lots of things, like little things that we look for, but as soon as I kind of help them, like correct them, and they're like, oh, that just got so much harder. I'm like, yeah, because now I'm making you use, and then I go one step further and make them just try to use the weaker side, and they can't do it. Yeah.
Well, again, that's so important too, because when you're looking at someone who wants to build, a foundation of strength, you talk about stripping it all the way down, and Angela is famous for embarrassing people only within the context of her and yourself and her one-on-one training. But again, it's like, you've got, you could take some of these athletes who, probably deadlift or squat, well over 300 pounds. And, and it's almost embarrassing when you actually put them into a position that they should be able to get to functionally, but then they have no strength whatsoever because they haven't worked on it. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is when you start to force, a training session, and you don't have that good foundation, your body has an incredible ability to adapt. We say this all the time. So, and that is part of the neuromuscular system. It wants to be efficient. So for us, like efficiency and movement sometimes is, what's the shortest, quickest way to do it, and, probably least stiff, least painful way of doing something. So if you have like an old injury or something, or you never trained appropriately or did, all one-sided sports, and now all of a sudden you're trying to engage muscles and you never learned the foundation of how to move, then you actually make stronger the muscles that are already strong, and then you create more of a gap between your weaknesses and your strengths. And and I think what you do very well for people is you help them focus on where are you weak. Let's bring that up to speed. And now we start with a stronger foundation to be able to add more strengthening. Am I hitting that appropriately?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Two fairly recent examples come to mind. The one was young guy in his 20s, post-army, in really good shape, was going to the gym 6 days a week. Just, you look at this guy, he's in shape. Super strong. Super strong, very muscular. And came over to do some mobility work. And he's like, this is the hardest workout I've ever done in my life. I mean, he was sweating. This was, and that was like 30-minute, again, just trying to work some of that hip mobility, some of the rotation. Classic, because he came in, he was having low back pain, he was having pain with running, and so just like, well, yeah, you can't, your joints aren't moving. You're very, very strong, but they're not getting that full range of motion, which then when you're trying to do things like running, which is a much more dynamic movement, they can't do it, and it's causing you pain.
Then again, that running, that repetitive movement and running is not full range of motion, and we see that all the time where the runners, especially long distance runners or even sprint, like you're so stiff because they only take their range of motion through maybe 25% of what a normal range of motion with the hip, the knee. I mean, think about it. You don't bend your knees that much whenever you're running, probably less than 20% when you're depending on the gauge, but it's not a lot. I mean, again, you think you got you should have close to 150, degrees of knee flexion. And, if you're just running and, taking a step off, I'll have to look that up. But the percentage is not, you probably are, less than 20% of what a full range of motion would be in your knee whenever you're running. Now, versus a squat, you're getting closer, especially the deeper you get. You have much further range of motion in the hip and the knee. And so that's where it's important whenever we talk about resistance training, right? We are such big advocates of resistance training because the more and more research that continues to come out, right? We always used to joke like, Angela used to be in research, as many of you know. And, we always joke about like, oh yes, we're going to spend millions of dollars to find out that, diet and exercise causes you to lose weight and it's healthy for you. Like, how many more studies do we need to continue to spend money? Who knew? What we need is more money to be able to implement and execute these programs in a healthy way.
We got it. Let's do
it. But the type of exercise is important.
Yes.
And, we have so many patients, and again, are avid runners or, avid cardiovascular, they like to do the
cardio,
treadmill, the cardio, elliptical, bike, and none of that is bad. It's all very good, but it is one piece of the fitness equation. Yes. And I think that's where a lot of people miss this with the flexibility, but really like we were talking about today, mobility.
Yeah.
So how do you move that, range of motion through an entire, strongly, through an entire normal range of motion? And that's where the resistance comes into play because you're gaining strength. And with that strength, you're gaining better neurological communication between brain and muscle, and then the joints that surround it. So you're actually gaining strength with the tendons and the ligaments because you're going through a full range of motion whenever you do things. And there's again the science behind what that does. When you're actively pumping your muscle through a full range of motion and how that affects the health of the joint. Not just from a strengthening perspective, but then a neurological connection. I mean, there was a study out recently that, resistance exercise was significantly better than taking an antidepressant when you're talking about major depression disorder. So it's like, how do we get this stuff more implemented? And, especially for people who don't do it regularly.
And that's the thing is it's like people, And it's funny because my clients, whenever I'm showing them stuff, they're like, you make that look so easy. I'm like, well, yeah, I do it
every day.
Like, and trust me, it's like when I'm doing my workouts, there's definitely ones that I stumble through. And I mean, it's like, yeah, there's times I fall off the things, and not every exercise looks perfect every time, because you have to be challenging yourself. If I just did the stuff that was easy, I wouldn't be getting stronger and more mobile. I have to, I challenge myself the same way I challenge my clients, and that's the only way to improve. And that's what it really all comes down to. I mean, we've talked about, the functional training is what I specialize in. And that's really the key component to mobility. Because again, you can go to the gym, you can use the leg press machine,
3
the
by
curls,
3 by 10.
But we don't live in a world of machines. You don't live your life that way. You're not ever just activating your bicep muscle. You're not ever just activating your quads or your glutes. We live in a world where you need to be able to do all of these things. You need to be strong enough. Like, think about getting in and out of a car, or in and out of a tub, that you need to be strong enough to support, again, your body weight on one leg, because at some point you are on one leg. Yep. You need to have the mobility, the movement, the range of motion in your hip to be able to lift it up and over. You need to have the balance to be able to support yourself. You need to have the core strength to be able to support yourself. And we didn't even get into core. We could do a whole separate podcast just on core strength, but that's such a, I think we have done one actually.
Yeah,
on that. So. Like, it's been 7 years. I feel like we've talked about everything there is to talk about. But here we are.
Here we are.
It's like, are you guys tired of hearing this yet? So, no, core, I mean, that's another huge component to mobility, because again, if you can't, think about some of those ones we're doing where you're laying on the ground and you're lifting your legs up. Well, if your core isn't strong enough to even do that, you're not even going to be able to get to the part where we're even working the mobility, because you can't even support the weight of your own legs.
Well, it creates leverage, right? You're locking yourself, you're locking joints in place that you don't want to move, because again, everything, when you talk about joints, motion across joints takes leverage. And so, one area is fixed and another area is moving around there. So, in a bicep curl, the top part of your arm is fixed and the lower part is moving. And so when you're talking about core, if you're trying to move your legs laying on the ground face up, like this part is not moving. So everything else is still locked down. But if you don't have a strong core, and your spine is arching your back and moving, that creates weakness and inefficient movement across the hips, and again can lead to injury if you can't do it appropriately. So
it's so important to work all of those. And when you're working with functional training, so again, it's like, space we have next door, there's no big heavy weights or machines or anything. It's you're literally using your body with maybe some light resistance bands, using the TRX. But a lot of it's doing stuff on uneven surfaces. So again, the balance pads, the BOSU, that's going to help stabilize all of those. People are always asking, like, well, why do I have to do this on this? It's so much harder. I'm like, exactly. That's why. Because if you can get to the point that you can have one foot on a BOSU and do a lunge, and you're not doing that, your ankle's not shaking like this, it's going to put you in a much better position when you get out in the real world and you step on an uneven surface. And now all of a sudden you have the mobility in your ankle that it can handle that, instead of just going to the ground or twisting it or worse.
How many times do we talk about adaptability as the simplest definition of health? And we talk a lot about it in relationship to the immune system, but talk about it just in terms of a gross motor movement. If you trip or you step off a curb funny and you stumble, if you have good balance, good coordination, good mobility, you can catch yourself before you ever go down. But a lot of people,
or get back up if you do.
Or if you do go down, rolling away and like, okay,
I remember I went on a hike over the winter, and somebody was like, "Oh, how was your hike?" I was like, "Oh, it was good. I only fell twice." They're like, I'm like, "Well, I mean, it's a winter hike. I'm I'm careful, but it's
you're slick."
And I was like, but again, it's like I was able to just I almost just turn it into a lunge. Like I felt myself start to slip, and I kind of just turned it into a lunge, went down, stabilized, and was able to get back up. It's like because I know my body knows how to do that, and I'm strong enough and have the mobility to do that. Whereas I mean, some of those falls could have really wiped somebody out if they don't know how to control their body that way. And that's where I come back to mobility. Mobility is control, like being able to, it's one, can you get on the ground? Well, yeah. Actually, I love this. My one older client, she was, I'm like, I always ask people, like, are you able to get on the ground? She's like, honey, everyone get on the ground. It's can you get back up? And I think about that every time. I'm like, you're right.
Gravity will help you down.
Everyone is capable of getting on the ground. So reword that. Can you control yourself as you get down to the ground? And can you get back up? And those are two huge things that will really predict longevity, actually. So I remember I had you doing that. The challenge, one of the big predictors of longevity is, can you get all the way down to the ground and back up without using your hands? So going down into a cross-legged position and coming back up. And it's a 10-point scale. And so if you can get all the way down and all the way back up with control, that's a perfect 10. And it's a good predictor of longevity, because that takes strength. It takes mobility in your joints. It takes core. It takes balance. It takes all of the things that we just talked about in one motion. You have to be able to do that. And again,
I did not get a 10.
Yeah, I think I'm a 9. But
yeah, probably an 8.5.
I used to be able to do this darn hip. I'm telling you, this darn right hip. But it's funny because you'll take some of these, really jacked, strong looking people. And I mean, it's like they're like going down and thump and then trying to get back up. Absolutely not. And, okay, great. They're really strong. You can bench a lot. You can squat a lot. But what does that mean for long-term, longevity, health and wellness, just being able to live your life to the fullest? So again, I'm not saying don't do those things. That's great. Strength is absolutely a component of it, but making sure that you're looking at the full picture. And if you are someone that likes to lift heavy, the more mobile those hips, the hips, ankles, and knees are, you're going to actually, and same with shoulders. That was the other example I was thinking of, was a woman probably about my age, and again, super strong, super athletic. I'm sure she can bench more than me. And she's like, oh, my bench is just feeling really restricted post shoulder surgery. She's like, I just, I don't know. Can I just come? I'm like, so I'm like, she's going to be bored with this workout I put her through. One resistance band, the latest resistance, did the entire, she's like, I'm dying. This is,
because when you don't activate those small stabilizing muscles, and that's we didn't even get into that, but like there's a difference between like major muscle movers and like small stabilizer muscles, especially when you get around the spine. And that's a lot of times what happens is when you have asymmetries and weaknesses, it's those small stabilizing muscles that are activating more because you have weaknesses in the big movers. So they're grabbing on. Yeah, so they're grabbing on, and they're not supposed to do that. Those
are the ones that are supposed to actually be able to help you.
They're supposed to let your body know where you are in space, not necessarily activate in a big, strong way. So again, the balance between that. But so let me ask you this. If someone is new to mobility, are there like, a handful, 3 to 5 simple exercises that you would recommend everyone do, like, most days of the week?
So I would say, actually, so if you check out my movement minutes on YouTube, there's probably about 50 of them on there. But a big one is so being able to lunge, but all the way down to the ground. So not a lot. Like a lot of times you'll see people doing a lunge, and again, they're stopping. They might be several inches before that back knee is on the ground. So if you can lunge all the way down to the ground,
you allow a little knee bend when you do that on the back leg.
Okay. That's what I'm saying. Like lunge, so you're going to lower your back knee all the way down to the ground. And then if you can come back up from that, and if you can do that, you're going to go down to the ground and then actually kick your other knee back around. And again, I can attach some of the specific movement minutes to this. But that is really, so basically, because again, that's allowing you to get all the way down to the ground and back up. So that's a really important one. If you can't do it without holding on, obviously hold on to something. But that's a big one. The figure 4 stretch where you're on your back and cross your leg over. A lot of people know that as a stretch. Well, to make it a mobility, so you're in that position and then you're going to actually lift your foot off the ground and pull your hips towards you. So now I know you did. Everyone does.
Actually, I think the worst one I hated was the one where we were just sitting legs out and lifting your leg one at a time over like a towel. I know, right? It's it just hurts just thinking about it.
And then the other one, so sitting on the ground, legs out, and then just bending side to side, which doesn't seem like much, but you should, within that position, be able to get your elbow all the way down to the ground, which most people cannot, but that's going to work a lot of mobility through that, the spine, through that, through the back and midsection there. And then, I mean, the 90-90 windmill stretch, we've talked about that a ton, but that's another one where, again, sitting on the ground with one leg in front and the other behind, just if you can sit in that position, great. To make it a mobility, then you're going to rock those legs back and forth. So generally when you're talking about training mobility, it's not going to be long holds. It's not necessarily even going to be high rep. It's just it's about the fluidity. So you want to I always tell people, you should feel in control of the entire movement. So if I yell stop at any point, you should be able to stop and hold whatever position you're in. That's the control aspect. So again, if you could fold over and touch your toes, great. But can you control all the way down, all the way back up? Same with lifting your legs. Okay, well, if you can lift your leg, great. Can you lift it all the way up with control, hold it there, extend it, bring it back in, rotate through that? So the more, it might all sound simple, or it might not, depending on what your what your starting point is. But being able to do those. So I'd say those couple are big ones to hit the hips, the mid back. I mean, shoulder mobility, just the one you were even talking about, just
being able to get your arms up overhead.
Standing against the wall and going all the way up and all the way back.
And again, keeping your back flat, because if you arch like that, you're weak in the core. So being able to hold that in there is very important.
That's a good upper body one. But I mean, it's really all about, what your starting point. Because again, for people that are very, very weak, I mean, that they're not going to be able to do that. If you can't get on the ground, that's going to limit what you can do. So that is why it is so important to, if you aren't somebody who works out regularly, or you're dealing with a lot of weakness or maybe post-injury or things where you're concerned about hurting yourself, that's why it's even more important to, check in with me or somebody else and make sure that you're doing things supervised. Because a lot of, with personal training, it's, I'm coming up with the workout for you, but the other component to it that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think of is it's the supervision, essentially. It's in real time, correcting issues, making sure you're not getting hurt, making sure you're not falling, absolutely, I can give you stuff to do at home, but we can always push it a little bit more in person, because I'm right there and I can make sure that it's not going to be too much for you. We can make adjustments day to day. I mean, there's times I have workouts planned out and somebody comes in and they're like, oh, this is bothering me. Okay. We'll make adjustments right on the spot. So it's definitely something worth looking into if you're not familiar with mobility or have never done a full mobility workout. And you don't need, 30 minutes. I have a lot of clients that come in just for a 30-minute session, and we just focus on, hip mobility or some full body. But it's after 30 minutes of time, and you can attest to that.
You're hurting, you're sweating, you're hurting,
hurting in a good way.
In a very positive way. Like you're activating the muscle, which again goes back to that resistance training, because you don't activate the muscle in the same way running, biking, swimming as you do during resistance and mobility work. So so I mean, I would check out a lot of the videos that she has. We can put a couple links on there. She got so many mobility exercises that are very, very important. If you're new to mobility, again, just you can give us a call. You can do a session to kind of learn what it is. And I know in the past we've done kind of like small classes before, where it's like people can come in and get introduced to what it is, and again, start adding it slowly into your routine. Not just stretching and flexibility, but being able to strengthen, control,
yes, strength and
control movement through full range. So.
Mobility March here in the office. So
and beyond.
And beyond, yeah. Mobility forever, but mobility for life. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me when you're here at the office, or again, reach out to us via, our website. Give us a call. You know how to find us, but yes, definitely something that if you're not quite sure or been thinking about it, maybe this is your sign to give it a shot. So, hey,
give us a call.
I'm here to help.
All right. We'll see you all at the next one. Thank you.
We'll see you guys.
You've been listening to another episode of What the Health? The podcast where anything health is fair game, with your hosts, Dr. Dan, Angela, and Dr. Riley. Brought to you by Churro Family Chiropractic. If you'd like to learn more about some of the resources mentioned on this show, or you have questions about something that was discussed, please reach out through our website at www.turofamilychiropractic.com. Remember to like and subscribe to What the Health Podcast to catch all the latest episodes and replay your favorites. Thank you for listening, and remember, we're always here to help when you find yourself saying, "What the hell?"